Hello, everyone. This is the 42nd episode of the Soccernostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles, and I'm joined by Paul from Shipley in England. For this episode, we welcome back Mr. Jan Roskott of DutchSoccerSite.org as we discuss the matches of the Holland national team for the 1984-85 season. Jan, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Thank you. Last time we left off in the spring of 1984 with Holland defeating an understrength Danish side 6-0. The 1983-84 season had generally been a positive one results-wise, despite the controversial Spanish 12-1 win over Malta that eliminated Holland from the 1984 Euros. For this season, 1984-85, Holland's objective was to qualify for the 1986 World Cup in Mexico. They were grouped with Hungary, Austria, and Cyprus. So it was a three-way battle between Hungary, Austria, and the Dutch. Of course, the team that finished second would still have a chance to qualify via a playoff, but that's for the following season. This season and the World Cup qualifiers started on October 17th, 1984 at Rotterdam's De Kuip Stadion. Holland were at home facing Hungary. Holland were still managed by Kees Rijvers. So for this match, you have starting in the net, Hans van Breukelen of PSV Eindhoven, Sonny Siloy of Ajax, Ronald Spelbos of Ajax, captaining the side, Ben Wijnstekers of Feyenoord, Frank Rijkaard of Ajax, Willy van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven, Michel Valk of PSV Eindhoven. He'd be replaced by Erwin Koeman of Groningen in the 67th minute, Ruud Gullit of Feyenoord, Wim Kieft at Pisa in Italy, Marco van Basten of Ajax. He'd be replaced by Peter Houtman of Feyenoord in the 66th minute, and René van der Gijp of Lokeren in Belgium. And I'll quickly go through the Hungarian side. You have Josef Andrus of Honved, Josef Cardos of Újpest Dózsa, Sándor Salai of Honved, Antal Roth of Pexi Munkas, Imre Garaba of Honved. He'd be replaced by Ferenc Zongradi of Videoton in the 46th minute, Joseph Varga of Honved, Antal Nagy of Honved, captaining the side Tibor Nilasi of Austria Vienna in Austria, Lajos Detari of Honved, Marlon Esterházy of Honved, Josef Kiprich of Tatabánya, who would be a cult favorite at Feyenoord for many years in the late 80s and early 90s. He'd be replaced by Bela Bodoni of Honved in the 89th minute, side managed by Georgi Metzi. The Dutch would take the lead in the 21st minute. There was a corner on the left side taken by Van der Gijp, and Kieft scored with a near post header. Yep. Hungarians tied the match just 5 minutes later in the 26th minute, when Esterházy's cross from the left side led to a melee in the box with missed kicks back and forth, with finally Detari slotting it in. Hungary took the lead and won the match in the second half. In the 55th minute, a cross from the right side, from the middle, reached Esterházy, who went in and toe-poked past Van Breukelen. And already the Dutch qualification prospects were in danger. Obviously, you know what happened after this match, or actually days after this match.
I was there in the stadium watching the match, and it was really disappointing. We obviously just, not just, but we missed the European Championship 1984, which ended up, I think, being one of the most exciting ones, with some amazing football, and everybody was talking about Denmark and France, and it was exciting, and we missed out. And then we missed out on winning this first match, and I think it was Kees Rijvers' final match, wasn't it, as a coach?
Yes. He resigned, I think early November he resigned.
Yeah. And he was already, of course, an older man, and the selection of the squad that the Dutch had were quite young and needed more young players to be brought in, players that were missing, obviously, in this particular game. I do remember that we started with a good first goal that we scored, a typical Kieft header at the near post, as he always came to the near post. It looked very comfortable. But I also have to say that in those days, as you may remember, Hungary and Austria as well, actually, were very good teams. The Hungary and Austria of today are considered minions, I think, in European football. Hungary in the 50s was obviously amazing. But in the 80s, they were pretty good too. You mentioned Kieprich already. He was an amazing forward. And the guys who scored, I forgot his name, but you mentioned the name.
Detari, yeah.
Yeah, very good players. And they used to play very tight sort of combination football in the middle of the park. And then they would draw the opponent in, and then would use the flanks with speed. And that's how they got the goals as well, because that was where they found the space. And they would break, and they were really impressive.
This was the last good Hungarian side, actually.
Yeah, probably.
I think you were about to say this was the last time they qualified for the World Cup as well, wasn't it?
Right.
And looked like a force. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to discuss Keith's rivals. He'd been in charge since 1981. He was appointed midway through the 1982 World Cup qualifiers and failed to qualify the Dutch. But again, the Dutch had, even before he was appointed, had started with a couple of losses. So it was always an uphill task for him. He was charged with phasing out the old guard of the 70s glory years and grooming the new generation of the Dutch stars. And it's just taking a look at some of the players that he gave international debuts to. Rijkaard, Kieft, Hullet, Vandenberg, Wouters, Ronald Koeman, Erwin Koeman, Van Basten, and Van Tichelen, which is basically the backbone. Yeah, the backbone of the 88 Euro winners, basically.
That's exactly right. And he was an interesting coach. Not a lot of people will know much about him. Obviously, he never won trophies with the national team. But he did won a lot with club teams, FC Twente and PSV in particular. But as a player, he was an incredible creative forward. Little fella, a little bit like in the Messi, Foden type players, really quick attacker in the Dutch team, but he was not a typical football player. You know, like typical football coaches, they have a swagger, they're streetwise, they're bluffing. And he was not like that. He was quiet. He was always with his wife. His wife always made his sandwiches for him in the bus. He was a really typical from the eastern part of the country. So he didn't fit the profile of your typical Rinus Michels type bullying coach yelling at the sideline. He was almost like an accountant or a lawyer, the way that he looked. But he was very loyal to his players. The thing that got to him, I think, is that he treated the national team as a club team. So he wanted to really instill his tactics into the team. But he obviously never had the time to do that because you don't get the players that long. And I think that's where everything went awry with him. I always liked him.
Resigning after one match, though, seemed abrupt. Was there more to this than that?
Yeah, there were some health issues, I think, with him. And he was always a bit the reluctant coach. He didn't like the media stuff around it. He didn't like all the BS. I think that he was, I remember from the Malta game with Spain for the Euros, that he never even watched it. People came at his house, journalists and TV reporters, after Spain trashed Malta to ask for his comments. And he opened the door and didn't even know that Spain had won with 12-1. And they said, well, how come? And he said, it was just that the neighbors playing cards. He wasn't the football fanatic that you would expect in terms of watching everything that was going on. So I think he just went like, you know what, it can't be bothered. I'm not going to keep on doing this. And that's how I remember it, at least. Highly respected, though, in the Netherlands, the guy. Highly respected.
To replace him, we have Rinus Michels back for a second spell as the national team manager. Obviously, everyone knows that he was the Dutch manager for the 1974 World Cup. In the interim, he had managed Barcelona, I know he was a few years in America.
Yep, he was in the US. Was he with in the LA, I think?
Yes. And now he was back at the Federation at KNVB. After Rivers, he was appointed as manager, as savior of sorts.
He appointed himself because he was in that sort of coordination role at the Federation.
Yeah.
And he was very dominant, was a very dominant guy. And I think that he was always afraid, and this is a famous link to Johan Cruyff as well, of course. He was always afraid that another coach would come in and do what he wasn't able to do, which is winning a World Cup, which is why he also blocked Johan Cruyff's appointment as a bonds.
Yes. He also appointed himself in 1990.
Exactly right. So when Rivers was sort of weak or doubting or whatever, Michels was happy to step in. Where I said Rivers was a highly respected and loved guy, I don't think that applied to Michels in the Netherlands.
The general, as he's called.
Exactly, yeah.
His first match in charge would be on November 14th for an away trip at Vienna's Praterstadion, taken in Austria. And we must remember Austria had qualified for the 1978 and the 1982 World Cups and were a decent side. For this match, for Michels' second spell in charge, we have Hans van Breukelen in goal from PSV Eindhoven, captaining the side Ronald Spelboos of Ajax, Ernie Brands of PSV Eindhoven, one of the heroes of the 1978 World Cup, recalled to the national team by Michels, Edo Ophoff of Ajax, Adrie van Tigelen of Groningen, Peter Boev of Ajax. He replaced by René van der Gijp. At this point, he had joined PSV Eindhoven in the 33rd minute. Willy van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven, international debutant Toon Lokhoff of PSV Eindhoven. He replaced by another international debutant, Mario Been of Feyenoord in the 73rd minute. Michel Valk of PSV Eindhoven, Ruud Gullit of Feyenoord, and Marco van Basten of Ajax. And quickly going to the Austria lineup, Friedrich Concilia of Austria Vienna, Gerald Messlender of Admira Wacker. He's replaced by Leo Lehner of Rapid Vienna in the 85th minute. Heribert Weber of Rapid Vienna. The late Bruno Petzai. At this time, he was at Werder Bremen in West Germany.
Fantastic player.
Yes. Walter Hormann of Sturm Graz. Herbert Prohaska of Austria Vienna, who had actually had spells at Inter and Roma in Italy.
Yeah, not a bad player either, right?
Of course, yeah. Kurt Jara of Grasshopper Zurich in Switzerland. Karl Branoder of Rapid Vienna. Walter Schachner. At this time, he was at Torino in Italy. Tony Polster of Austria Vienna. And Gerhard Steinkogler of Austria Vienna. Side managed by Erich Hoff. For this match, it would be another Dutch loss, and their prospects were even bleaker at this point. And at this point, they could only hope for second place in the group, it seemed like, with Hungary winning match after match. For this match...
He scored the only goal there, and still
of course. Yeah. So, the goal was an own goal from Michel Valk. Whereas Kurt Jara took a low cross that was deflected in from the left side. That was deflected in by Michel Valk. Second loss for the Dutch.
Well, can I say something about that? Because it was deflected while the cross was being brought in. It was deflected on its way. And then on the goal line, Valk tried to just hit it back into the pitch, into the field. And he mishit it. And on the goal line, he just hit it straight up to the bar and then in the goal. It was an amazing blunder in a way, but really sad as well. And I think that he never recuperated from that, although he played a good game. Yeah, people always talked about that own goal, and it just kept on following him all the time. Crazy.
We must mention Mario Bina, the debutant. Yeah. It would be his one and only cap. At this time, Mario Bina, who would later play for Pisa in Italy. There was a lot of hype about him. Many people were predicting that he would be a future great. But beyond this match, he never played for Holland.
I think partly because he wasn't able to really, how do you say that, deliver on the promise. He was fantastic in the youth team. I think you mentioned it in our last episode that we did, how he played for the young Oranje team in Argentina, was it, or Mexico, I think it was.
Right.
Where they compared him to Maradona. And he had a bit of that swagger as well, wearing the number 10. When he was playing at Feyenoord in the year where Cruyff was there, they did clash at times because he's a street kid. He had a big mouth, the Johan Cruyff and Willem van Hanegem, and that wasn't always accepted. So that was one aspect. I think another problem was that Ajax was just brimming with talent at the time. You had Bosman, Van Basten, Van Schip, Wouters, Valenberg, Rijkaard, all these guys. And the Rotterdam Feyenoord players, they were at each other's throats a little bit. That started in the youth teams, and every match they played against each other, it was always, the knives were out. And I think that might have had an influence, maybe on Michels as well. Even today, with an Ajax coach as national team manager, there's always people that say, oh, he is selecting Tete of Fulham because he's got an Ajax background, and he's not selecting Karsdorp from Roma, who's got a Feyenoord background. That's always going to be there. And it might have played a part with Bain, but Bain actually never really delivered on his promise. He was a bit lazy, he was a little bit complacent, and that's what you get.
He went to Pisa, I believe it was like 88, 89 season, and Pisa were relegated. And he returned. I think he returned after a season. I don't remember if he stayed at Serie B or did he return?
I think he did. And then
he did. Back. Oh, then he became
I think so. I can check it out. But yeah, and then he returned to what did he play for Heerenveen? I think.
Yeah, but like you said, he was more or less off the radar as far as the national team.
Yeah, I think that you see it sometimes with other players as well from other nationalities. That if you build a team around them, it might work. But they just don't fit the whole team dynamics. And then it's probably best to leave them out. I remember stories like Schuster in Germany, Bernd Schuster and Wolfgang Overath. They didn't fit together on one midfield. Lampard and Gerrard, all those stories. And I think it was the same a little bit with Bain. He was a real number 10, a playmaker, whereas Ajax played a different style of football. And when you have all those talents from the Amsterdam side, then you would be silly not to model your team a little bit on that.
Right.
And that's what they did. Can I say something about this?
Of course.
Because René van der Gijp came off the bench, and there's a rumor going around, and sort of an urban myth, that he was, you know René van der Gijp maybe, he's currently one of the most popular comedians / football analysts on Dutch television. He's got his own program on Dutch television 2 times a week, commenting on whatever is going on. And he's a really funny guy. And the story is that he was so obnoxious and annoying on the bench during the game that Michels decided to bring him in so that he didn't have to listen to all this bullshit.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure if it's true, but that's a story that's been going around for a while.
I guess they were losing. Any option would have been better at this point. So
that's it. Yeah, that's it.
We come to the last match of the calendar year, December 23rd at Nicosia at Cyprus. The Dutch taking on Cyprus. Everyone would have thought it would have been a formality, but the Dutch were clearly struggling and only came away with a 1-0 win with the goal minutes from the end in the 84th minute. For this match, you have Hans van Breukelen of PSV Eindhoven in goal, Ben Wijnstekers of Feyenoord, captaining the side Ronald Spelbos of Ajax, Peter Boev of Ajax, Willy van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven, Michel Valk of PSV Eindhoven, Marco van Basten of Ajax, Ruud Gullit of Feyenoord, Ernie Brands of PSV Eindhoven, Peter Houtman of Feyenoord, René van der Gijp of PSV Eindhoven. He'll be replaced by Ronald Koeman of Ajax in the 77th minute. The goal was scored in the 84th minute, as we mentioned. From the middle, Van der Kerkhoff crossed in a box, and Houtman headed it in. But it was a very poor result for the Dutch, who were expected to win and score goals. They won, but again, this did not help their qualification prospects.
Frustrating match to watch. It was such a bad pitch, I remember. Playing away against those countries back in the day was always dreadful. You really had to be good. This sounds funny because they're bad teams to play against, but you still had to be really good to break them down because they just kicked out at everything that moved. And if you're not playing well, then it's becoming very hard. I remember seeing the game on telly and being so relieved that we just got one goal.
Just got a result and leave, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you look at the group as well, both Austria and Hungary only won narrowly there as well. So it was obviously a difficult place to play at that time.
Yeah.
We come to the New Year 1985. Rinus Michels has medical issues, I believe, with his heart, and he has to have surgery. As a result, he has to take a break from the national team. This break would last a year or so. So in the interim, Leo Binhacker was appointed as national team manager for the remainder of the qualification process. They started the new year, February 27th, at Amsterdam's Olympic Stadion against Cyprus. Again, for this match, Leo Binhacker selected the following squad: Hans van Breukelen of PSV Eindhoven in goal. Captaining the side, Ben Wijnstekers of Feyenoord. Ernie Brands of PSV Eindhoven. Peter Boev of Ajax. Willy van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven. Dick Schonacker of Ajax. This was his recall to the national team. I don't recall when was his last cap before that. It may have been maybe a year, maybe more before that.
Yeah.
Erwin Koeman of Groningen. Ruud Gullit of Feyenoord. And he replaced by René van der Gijp of PSV Eindhoven in the 72nd minute. Marco van Basten of Ajax. Wim Kieft of Pisa in Italy. And a recall to the national team, Simon Tahamata, now at Feyenoord. Now, we must remind ourselves, Simon Tahamata had been involved in the Standard Waterschei match-fixing scandal in Belgium that came to light in early 1984. As a result of that, many players, these are Belgian players like Eric Gerrits, Walter Muse, and Simon Tahamata among them, were suspended for more than a year. And they were only eligible, their suspension ended early 1985. So Simon Tahamata had joined Feyenoord and he was recalled to the national team. And we'll discuss later, actually Walter Muse, the Belgian defender, joined Ajax at the same time when the suspension ended. And this was a comfortable Dutch win at home, 7-1.
It didn't start it comfortably though, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. Marango scored in the 8th minute for Cyprus, but the Dutch struck back quickly. Erwin Koeman in the 12th minute. This was his first goal for Holland.
Beautiful volley. He took the ball in one hit on his left and hit it straight into the... Yeah, it was a good goal.
Yes. Wim Kieft in the 28th and 59th minute. Dick Schonacker, 31 and 79th minute. An own goal by Panzarias in the 64th minute. And Marco van Basten scoring in the 65th minute. The Dutch won comfortably, but this was only expected. The next match for the Dutch would be on May 1st. At Rotterdam's De Kuip Stadion, with the Dutch taking on Austria. For this match, again, managed by Leo Binhacker, you have Hans van Breukelen of PSV Eindhoven in goal. Returning to the national team, Michel van de Corput of Feyenoord. Ben Wijnstekers capping the side from Feyenoord. Ernie Brands of PSV Eindhoven. Willy van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven, Dick Schonacker of Ajax, Frank Rijkaard of Ajax, Erwin Koeman of Groningen, René van der Gijp of PSV Eindhoven. He'd be replaced by international debutant Rob de Wit of Ajax in the 77th minute. Wim Kieft of Pisa in Italy, and Simon Tahamata of Feyenoord. And quickly going to the Austrian side, you have Friedrich Concilia of Austria Vienna, Leo Lehner of Rapid Vienna, Bruno Petzai of Werder Bremen in West Germany, Ewald Turmer of Austria Vienna, Karl Branader of Rapid Vienna, Walter Hormann of Sturm Graz, captaining the side Herbert Prohaska of Austria Vienna, Gerald Wilfurth of Rapid Vienna, Reinhard Kienast of Rapid Vienna, Walter Schachner of Torino in Italy, Tony Polster of Austria Vienna, and he replaced by Peter Herstich of Rapid Vienna in the 79th minute, in a side managed by Branko Elsner. For this match, the Dutch would take the lead in the 55th minute. Van der Kerkhoff crossed in the path of Schonacker, who volleyed or crossed, however you look at it, to the far post, and Wim Kieft headed in. But 5 minutes later, Kienast put Schachner through, who chipped over the advancing Van Breukelen. And Austria got a valuable away point. So it seemed at this point. It was disappointing for the Dutch. By this point, believe it or not, Hungary had officially qualified. They won their 5th consecutive game and officially qualified. They're the first nation, I believe, to qualify from the European zone. The group was effectively over as far as the winners, but so it was left to Austria and the Dutch to fight it out for the second place. And at this point, Austria seemed better placed. We'll talk about next season what happens, though. Just a mention of Rob de Wit, and we'll talk about him for the next match as well, obviously. His career ended in 1986 after a cerebral hemorrhage.
Very rough, very rough. An amazing, gifted left winger with a similar sort of style as Robbie Rensenbrink, like the Snake Man. He could pass you. You didn't even notice that he went past you. Could score goals, but he was also a very open, lovely guy. Always happy to be interviewed. Always ready for a joke. He was available for the supporters. He was a kid from the street as well. Played for FC Utrecht before he went to Ajax. And he really fit in that Ajax team with Vanenburg and with Van Basten and Van Schip, all those young kids who were playing amazing football. And then suddenly, that happened. It was quite tough. And still every now and then he gets interviewed a little bit. I think some of his old football mates are still catching up with him regularly. So, but yeah, I do remember it was a blow.
We come to the last match of the season, just days later. Yes, yep. May 14th, against already qualified Hungary at Budapest Népstadion. Hungary had virtually nothing to play for. The Dutch had to win to have any remote chance of qualifying through the playoffs. For this match, you have Hans van Breukelen of PSV Eindhoven in goal, Michel van de Corput of Feyenoord, captaining the side Ben Wijnstekkers of Feyenoord, Adrie van Tigelen of Groningen, Frank Rijkaard of Ajax, Dick Schonacker of Ajax, Toon Lokhoff of PSV Eindhoven. He'd be replaced by Rob de Wit of Ajax in the 46th minute. Willy van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven. He'd be replaced by Ronald Koeman of Ajax in the 60th minute. Marco van Basten of Ajax. Wim Kieft of Pisa in Italy. And Simon Tahamata of Feyenoord. And quickly going through the Hungarian side, you have Peter Dichtel of Videoton, Joseph Cardos of Uchpes Doja, Sandor Salai of Honved, Antal Roth of Peksi Munkas, Imr Garaba of Honved, Antal Naji of Honved. He replaced by Joseph Varga of Honved in the 57th minute, Lajos Detari of Honved, Zoltan Peter of Zalaegerszegi, Joseph Kiprich of Tatabania, captain the side Tibor Nilashi of Austria Vienna in Austria, Marton Esterhazy of AEK Athens in Greece. He replaced by Ferenc Majaros of Peksi Munkas in the 71st minute. Side managed by Georgi Mezi. The Dutch had some absentees: Ernie Brands, Erwin Koeman, Hullet, Van der Gijp, Valk, Spelbos, and Houtman. In the 69th minute, both Dutch substitutes, Koeman and De Witt, were instrumental in the winning goal. From the right side of the middle, Koeman sent a long cross to De Witt on the left side. De Witt took the ball near the edge of the box, then suddenly dribbled towards the goal and chipped Digital to give the Dutch the winning goal.
Classic goal.
Yes. For the Dutch, Van Breukelen had a very good match, had many saves to keep the Dutch in the match. He was praised for all his saves. I remember Van Breukelen did an interview with World Soccer Magazine around 1993, I think. He discussed this match, and he said he made his best ever save in this match. Apparently, he tipped over an attempt from Nilashi from close range.
Yeah.
So he wasn't sure it was Nilashi, but that's what he thought. He said that Weinstekers kissed him in the lips after the save. He was so happy.
Crazy.
So, yeah. And also to mention that this was Schoenaker's last match for Holland. The season was over. Hungary had qualified. The Dutch will mention for the following season, they would make it to the playoffs. But overall, it was a poor season for the Dutch.
It was. Yeah, it was a poor season. Yeah.
As far as the takeaways, we see a lot of the players that are going to form the backbone of the 88 Euros. And we've discussed this in our previous podcast as well. A lot of those young players are part of the setup. But they're still, in this case at least, it's hard to imagine like just 3 years later, these players would be some of the best players in the world.
Yeah, there was a lot of talent, and I think that they needed to learn how to become real professionals. Because the Robbie De Witt we just discussed as well, he was almost like, he looked like a Beatle. He had long hair, and they were always having fun. And this was the generation where they went into the trainings camp for a Dutch national team match or whatever, and they would just disappear in the middle of the night. They would just climb out of the window of the hotel and go into town and party hard. That was their mentality. They didn't really take it that seriously as they would do today. And I think when Michels came back in the 88 campaign for the Euros, it changed a little bit. And I think they started to realize that it was a profession, that they were representing their country. Of course, they played for Milan, where they learned what being professional was about. I think the Dutch were always a little bit more, not laid back, because that's probably not the way to say it, but more a little bit of a cottage industry. Yeah, if you have talent, then it's good enough. And clearly it wasn't. But it was disappointing. But as you said, it was a bit of a transition from the old to the new. And there were players like René van der Gijp, like Mario Been and Michel Valken, that you thought, oh, okay, these could be our next stars. And then they ended up not being the next stars. So they needed to be replaced again by, another generation of Vanenburg. And so I guess that's what it was.
And you still see some of the old guard like Van der Kerkhoff, Brands, Van der Korput with a recall.
Yes, Simon Taamata.
Taamata,
exactly.
Yeah. They're waiting for some of the younger generation to come through still.
We also had three coaches. We had Rijvers and then Michels and then Beenhakker. And Beenhakker was not popular with all the players. He's typically the example of what I earlier mentioned as the guy with the swagger. He had the long raincoat, he had the cigar, and he was always, and I've met him a number of times, he was always charged with being an actor, like acting the success coach. And I think that's actually true. When the cameras were there, he was always puffing out of his cheeks, like, oh, and it was always hard. If a media guy would ask him a question, then he would always start with a big sigh, and life was tough and all that. And a lot of people, and particularly players, were like, oh God, there's all that fake stuff going on. So within the KNVB, or the federation in the Netherlands, people there was quite a gap between the players and their mentality and the people at the federation. And that goes still, obviously, when you talk about the federation, there's still in management, there's no football people there. They're accountants or lawyers or wherever they get them from, old politicians that they put in management. They can easily be impressed by the likes of Michels with all their background. So yeah, that's an ongoing problem.
And I noticed Vandenberg did not play at all this season for the national team. That's surprising.
Oh, yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a funny thing because he's probably one of the most gifted players we've ever had. Yeah. But he had a little bit of a mentality issue, I think. He really thought himself too that he was the best. He probably was, but it doesn't help if you bring that onto the pitch. But Johan Cruyff did something pretty bad with him because Vandenberg thought that he was going to be the new leader of the Dutch team and the new leader of Ajax. And he had a clash with Cruyff at some point at the training ground. And Cruyff said, with media around it, that Vandenberg was never going to be a leader because his voice, he had a very high voice, because he said he doesn't have the voice of a leader. You can't be a leader with that voice. He speaks like Donald Duck or something like that. And that has been following Vandenberg throughout his whole life, which is sad because he doesn't deserve that. And Cruyff should have been bigger than that. That's what happened. I think when he was at PSV Eindhoven, that there was a big contract for him to go to AS Roma.
Oh, yes, no. Yes.
You remember that?
Yeah, he signed valid contracts with both PSV and Roma or something like that. And,
yes, and then he didn't go.
Right,
and then
right.
He ended up going to Japan, which was definitely not a big football nation.
Yes, but by then he was kind of towards the tail end of his career. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, correct.
He signed a live contract actually during the whole Roma debacle. He signed a live contract and I guess pension with PSV. Like you said, he left.
That's correct.
In 93.
Now he's actually, since last year, he's back at Ajax.
Oh, is he?
As a youth coach. Yeah. I think he now realizes that he's never going to be seen as a potential head coach. Right. He tried everywhere and it never worked. And now he's a youth coach, a technique trainer, as they call it, at Ajax. And I hope he found his place there.
Paul, how about you? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange season, as we said, with the change of managers. Also, there's no friendlies played at all in that season, which can't have helped because there's no chance to experiment with the team outside of the competitive games. And I think as soon as that first game was lost against Hungary, there was obviously a lot of pressure on a very small qualifying group. So any defeat's going to make life difficult. And I think, all the players we've seen, the players are there, and it's just putting them together, which is obviously still a couple of years away.
Surprisingly, Holland Van Basten didn't really have too much of a starring role in terms of the national team this season. Van Basten just scored against Cyprus, but that's to be expected. He finished as the league's top goal scorer that season, 22 goals. But with the national team, he was still a couple of years away from being the top guy, a world-class player. And,
there was always that controversy between him and Kieft. And when Kieft was at Ajax, he was very young, already European top scorer. But he was basically told by Ajax, you got to get to another club because we want Marco van Basten to take your place. And Kieft wasn't ready to move. He didn't want to. But they sold him for a lot of money. And then Marco van Basten needed to be the the key man. But Kieft became quite important in this Netherlands team, of course, in that particular year, as you could see. And that probably blocked Van Basten again. Van Basten also was already quite susceptible to injuries. And I think also Cruyff, captain, or whoever was the coach at Ajax then, I don't think it was Cruyff, was keeping him away from the national team every now and then. So yeah, there's all that going on.
We can also briefly touch up on the league season, 84-85. For Ajax, you had the Danish players Jan Molby leaving for Liverpool and Jesper Olsen joining Man United. And we mentioned Walter Muse, once his suspension ended, he joined Ajax from Standard Liège. And also Spelbos returned to Dutch football from Club Brugge, and of course De Witt joined from Utrecht. Reading the Ajax roster, you have a very good side. You have Hans Galge in goal, you have Van Basten, Boev, a young Johnny Bozeman, Austrian Felix Gaslich, I believe it's pronounced.
Yeah, Gaslich, yeah.
Yes. Ronald Koeman, Walter Muse, Edo Ophoff, Rijkaard, John Van Skip, Dick Schonacker, Sonny Siloy, Spelbos, Vandenburg, and De Witt.
Yeah, and what a squad.
Yes, and they would win the league title that season. PSV Eindhoven, I seem to remember that season. PSV Eindhoven actually lost one less match than Ajax, but they tied so many matches that season. I think they had like 14 ties during the season. But they were a good side. They signed Van Breukelen from Nottingham Forest. As we mentioned, Van der Gijp joined after the season and started from Lokeren. And Danish striker Kenneth Brill joined from Anderlecht.
He was a disappointment. He was a fantastic striker, I think, but he didn't fit somehow.
Yes, he left after a year to Olympique Marseille. Players leaving PSV that season were Jan Portvillet. I believe he joined Cannes in France. I could be wrong.
Correct. Yeah, no, you're right. Very well.
And Arie Haan, former Dutch great, he left PSV, as well as Hans Seggers, the goalkeeper. I guess he was traded with Van Breukelen. He joined Nottingham Forest.
Yeah. He had
Brian
a good career
Clough,
in England,
just replaced one with the other.
Yeah.
Look at their roster. They're a very good team as well. Van Breukelen, Brands, Hub Stevens, Jan Heinz, Danish defender, Glenn Heisen, Swedish defender, Barry Van Aerle, who would be an integral part of the 88 Euro winning side, Piet Wildschut, who was in the 78 World Cup squad,
yes,
Lackhoff, Willy van der Kerkhoff, Valk, Norwegian striker Halvard Thorsen, Brill, and Van der Gijp.
If I'm not mistaken, they also had Frank Berghuis in the squad, who is the father of Steven Berghuis.
Oh, yes, possibly, yeah. They finished second, but Ajax won by 6 points, 54 points to 48.
Guus Hiddink was the assistant coach, yeah?
Oh, yes, that's right, yeah. I'm trying to remember, who was the head manager for PSV that season? Was it De Rekker?
That was Jan Reker.
Jan Reker, yes.
Yeah.
We come to defending champions Feyenoord, who actually finished third this season. Obviously, Cruyff had retired, and the Bulgarian Andrei Zhelyaskov joined Slavia Sofia.
My favorite player was that.
Yes, and Pierre Vermeulen joined MVV. So they got Simon Tahamata again after his suspension ended from Standard Liège. Johnny Rep, former Dutch great, joined from PEC Zwolle. And Icelandic striker Petur Petursson from Antwerp.
Yeah.
If you look at the side, you have Joop Hill in goal, who was backup to Van Breukelen for the 88 Euros. Siak Troost, who was one of the 88 Euro backup defenders. Van de Korput, Wijnstekers, Denmark defender Ivan Nielsen, who would later join PSV in a couple of years.
A monster.
Yes. Mario Bain, Andre Hoekstra, Hullet. This was his last season at Feyenoord. He would join PSV the following season.
Yep.
Houtman, Tahamata, Petursson, and Rep. Okay side, but Cruyff's absence hurt them. his influence and everything, they struggled for most of the
Yeah, it was
season.
a little bit too attacking, I think. I think that the Rotterdam fans were really spoiled with the Johan Cruyff year. It was a really amazing season, fantastic goals. So they got players like Johan Steur and Mario Been and young players, but also the older guard like Tahamata and Rep. And obviously, when you have players like Pieter Houtman, Johnny Rep, and Simon Tahamata, they don't defend. You can't expect them to put in a defensive. And Ruud Gullit also, of course, is the star of the show. So they were just too vulnerable at the back.
Yeah. The manager was Thijs Leibrox, right? Still?
No, that season I think it was Up Favier or Fafi, as you would probably call
Fafi.
it.
Okay. So
yeah,
left
okay. I think Favier is the way that we pronounced it. And Willem van Hanegem was assistant coach.
Yes.
And Thijs Leibrox, I think, would come in the next season.
I thought he was the manager for the title-winning side as well, wasn't he? Leibrox?
Oh no, that's right. You're right.
Yeah.
He was the title, yeah, of course, and then he would be the national team manager.
Of course, with of course, all the stories, would come up.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
and
talking about racism in football, huh?
Right. Yeah. So, as far as the cup, Utrecht won that season. They defeated Helmond Sport. Jan Wouters were still there, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And Danny Blind was still at Sparta, and Jan Wouters was still at Utrecht. Yeah.
The winning goal was by John van Loon in the 90th minute.
Who would later play for both Feyenoord and Ajax.
And Ajax, yes. Yeah. And Anderlecht, yeah.
And the Netherlands team, of course. Yeah.
Yes. The first time when I started seeing this team was getting strong was 86-87 season with the 88 Euro qualifiers, where by then Gullit and Van Basten had a different status internationally. That season, there was the continuous talk that they were going to join AC Milan, Berlusconi's AC Milan the following season. And PSV was starting to spend money and building a super team. And
Koeman.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's a discussion for a different time. But they started spending money and Ajax just couldn't keep up as far as the money that was spent. And we should mention at the conclusion of this season, Johan Cruyff would be appointed as Ajax manager for the following season.
Yeah, that was a very exciting time in the Netherlands. I mean, the fact that he came back to the Netherlands was exciting. The games he played for Ajax when he just came back were amazing. Then he came to Feyenoord, which was another amazing season. Whether you're a Feyenoord fan or not, that whole season in the Netherlands was really exciting, even with the young stars coming through. So even though internationally we didn't really do a lot in Europe or with the national team, the Dutch competition was quite incredible with all the talent on display. And we did feel that we needed to get back to a big tournament at one stage and show how good we were. But the level was pretty good domestically, which is different now, isn't it? Now the Netherlands, it's just a sort of a big academy for England and France and Spain, which is fine. We do enjoy watching it, but it's different.
Clearly more quality in terms of teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, PSV spent a lot of money in those days, and they still have that image of being very posh and spending. They're a bit like Chelsea, I guess, in England, seen as a upper class sort of team, whereas it's Ajax actually that's swimming in cash now. Whereas in those days, 86, 85, Ajax was dead poor. The reason why they developed all these young players and allowed Vanenburg his debut at 16 is partly because he was that good, but also because they didn't have money to buy players.
I had a little taste of Dutch football this season as well. I saw a friendly at the start of the season, Manchester United against Ajax.
Oh, wow.
That squad that we mentioned, Koeman, Rijkaard, Vanenburg, and Van Basten scored in that game. I wish I remembered more about it. I was only 10 at the time, but it was a very strong team. I don't think Van Basten played very many times in England at all, because I don't think he would have played in European competition. I think he missed the Holland games.
What was that tournament in 88 with Arsenal and AC Milan?
Yeah, I think he played in that. Yeah, he played another pre-season friendly. Yeah, I think it was called the Makita tournament. That one?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like right, yeah.
But that might be it. We'd have to check, but I don't think he played very many times at all. So I was lucky to see that.
Yeah, his career wasn't that long.
No,
you think about it.
No. Yeah,
real shame.
Yeah, his last match he was 28 years old.
Yeah.
Although he retired when he was 30, his last ever match was when he was 28.
28 years old, and his biography recently came out. And I think a lot of people now realize how terrible that injury was, because he writes in the biography that when he was doing his, how do you call it, when you have to get back to fitness, when he was like 31, 32, and he was operated on, I think, 9 times, that at night he had to go to the toilet. He crawled to the toilet crying because he couldn't walk. That's how painful it was. And I think he was suicidal even at a certain point. And there were a lot of people that said, why is Van Basten, after his career, why did it take him almost 10 years to find his way back into football? It was because he was dealing with all that. Yeah.
Isn't there a story also that after he was the national team manager, he found the stress of being a head coach too much, and he preferred to be assistant coach or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. He started out as the national team manager. He was the assistant coach of Ajax 2. And he was the assistant to Johnny van Schip. And then Cruyff said, take those two as the national team managers, because they were doing it ever so well at Ajax in the youth. And then the KNVB said, that's fine, but we might want Marco as the key guy because of his international reputation. And they both said, that's fine, because they had a deal together. They're good friends. They had a deal that they would have Johnny as the main coach and Marco as the assistant for a spell, and then turn it around for the next spell. So it was Marco's turn to be the head coach. So he became the national team manager. That went relatively well. Then he went to Heerenveen, I think, which was okay. Then he went to Ajax as a head coach, which was the dream job for many supporters to have him there. But he couldn't deal with the stress, but he also couldn't deal with the fact that supporters were yelling abuse at him for his team drawing, which is not his. I mean, he was like, oh, I can't help that. And people would yell, and this is a typical Dutch curse word, I'll translate it in English, pancake. You're a pancake. It's innocent, isn't it? If someone calls you a pancake, you sort of laugh. But he was just really upset about it. Then he went to work for AZ Alkmaar, and after a while he said, you know what? I want to do the shift change again. My assistant coach becomes the head coach, and I will be the assistant coach because I don't want to deal with all that stuff. So yeah, that's how he is. Now he's an analyst on TV, and he's wickedly funny and cynical, and he's really at his right spot.
Again, not a good season, and at this point, it's difficult to see that this team is going to grow. But do you think it's Michels' return that kind of pushed them, or?
No, I don't think so. I don't think Michels had a lot to do with it, in all honesty. And I may be a little bit biased. I'm not a big Michels fan. But I think what you mentioned earlier, Sean, is the fact that they came into the AC Milan fold, Johan Cruyff as a manager at Ajax, Koeman, his success at PSV. The boys became mature professionals. And I think Cruyff also made people realize what they could read if they worked for it and focused on it. And I think Cruyff's influence as an Ajax coach back then was bigger than Michels' national team role. So I think there's a lot of coincidentals with the national team in '88. We'll probably talk about that in another episode. But Michels went into the tournament wanting to play 4-3-3, and he didn't really have a place for Marco van Basten. And as we all know, we won the tournament playing 4-4-2 with Marco van Basten as the key guy. And Michels was just happy to go along with it, really. And it's a bit like Cruyff and Van Hanegem said in interviews many times that total football, that wasn't made up by Michels. It was the players that did that. Because they said, yeah, Michels was talking to us in the dressing room with all his tactical stuff, and then we would walk onto the pitch together and say, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do this. And they were very vocal and articulate guys in those days, streetwise, and they determined what happened on the pitch. And I think in England, Paul, the guys out there back in the 1960s and 70s, they would determine what was going to happen on the pitch, right?
Yeah, sometimes the manager was just a figurehead,
A
really.
placeholder. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it could happen, definitely. I think the Dutch have always been regarded as having that strong personality and strong characters that will do their own thing on times. Yeah.
We look forward to the following season, where it would kind of end in a heartbreak, but lay the groundwork for the future success. And we'll discuss that in depth. Once again, Jan, thank you very much for all your insights and analysis of Dutch football. For any questions and comments, you may contact us. You may contact me on my blog and Facebook under Soccer Nostalgia. On Twitter, I'm at SP1873. Mr. Paul Whittle can be contacted on his blog, The 1888 Letter, and on Twitter, he's at 1888 Letter. And you may also follow the podcast on Spotify under Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. Mr. Roskott can be contacted on email via jroskott@gmail.com. You may also follow on Twitter at Dutch Soccer Site and also on Facebook at DutchSoccerSite.org.
Thanks. Joy to be your guest again.
Encourage everyone to check your website. Very informative on Dutch soccer. Looking forward to our next chat for the 85-86 season.
Yeah. Let's get through those seasons quickly so we can move to the successful ones. Yeah. Thanks, guys. It was a joy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Take care.